Hi, my name is Kerry Critchlow from RCR Recording Studios, and today we're going to be going over delay. This is not meant to be comprehensive. Once again, we're just kind of going over some of the basic functionality and how you can apply it to some of your productions to add a little bit of life, a little color to your productions. And so this is probably going to be a little bit shorter today. There are more videos on YouTube than I can count on how to use delay in various creative endeavors. And so I'm just going to go over some of the basics today, how you can use it, how to apply it to tracks, and maybe a few common uses. But we're not going to get into a whole lot of detail on this. It's largely just to give you kind of an introduction to it, and then you can ideally start playing around with this and start, applying this to your own tracks to add that interest, as I was saying. So what is delay? Delay is essentially just an echo, I cannot spell, echo or repeat of your musical track. It's pretty simple. It has a few basic controls such as feedback and sometimes they'll have some EQ or filter sections on it. We'll go over that. And then the mix, which we'll get into as well. And there are probably a few others that I'm forgetting, but we'll get into that. So first, let's go ahead and load up an instrument. And I think we'll probably just start with a piano today. But this can be applied to anything. It's oftentimes used on like guitars, vocals, I mean, everything really. Like whatever your creative mind is telling you to use it on, it's probably worth trying and seeing what happens. So there's a few different ways that you can go about applying a delay. And that's either through this insert track, and an insert again is just putting it directly into the signal path of the track. The most common way to use delay is to use an aux or a send of some sort, and we'll get into why that is here in a little bit. But for right now, we're just going to use a simple insert. This is the less common way of doing it, and this is just a stock plugin from Cakewalk. And so we have feedback, crossfeed, mix. We've got our filter section, and then we can have our tempo sync or not to our the tempo of our DAW, or we can manually choose it. There's a lot of different ways to go about doing this. And then those are the basic controls. Some other delays might have more or less of some of these options, but every delay is essentially just creating an echo or a repeat of the sound source. All right. So we apply that to our track. And then if we come in here and we put on our piano roll view here, so we can start adding in some notes. So generally, well, we'll just turn it off for now. So here's what it would sound like if I'm just hitting the key. Now, if I turn on this delay, and I haven't done anything with this except sync it to the tempo of our DAW here. Now, if we hit this, you're going to hear some repeats of this. And these options here, feedback, crossfeed, and etc., these will allow you to choose how often those repeats happen, how loud those repeats are when they happen, and other kind of options here. So let's take a look at feedback. Feedback is essentially how long this repeat will go for. So if we turn this all the way down to 0%, it'll just be one repeat. Very quick. Oh, turn off this crossfeed too. So one repeat, and then the more we turn this feedback up, the more repeats you'll start to hear. And if we turn it up too much, what starts to happen is it will eventually start repeating on itself so much that it can start to like become infinite. If we go to all the way to 100, this will essentially mean it will never stop repeating. So turn it off again. So feedback is basically how many repeats there are. And some won't have this percentage, but feedback, essentially, the more you turn up your feedback, the more repeats you're going to get. Now, not all delays have this, or it's not always called crossfeed, but this is essentially how loud the repeats are going to be. And so the more you have this up, essentially the louder it will get over time. So every repeat will get louder and louder and louder as it goes. And with the combination of feedback, you want to be careful with this because you can actually start getting into a situation where it will become so loud and chaotic. And I'll just give you an example here. So we'll hit. Right, and so you heard it get louder and louder and louder. And if I were to let that go on, it would get pretty rough. So you can use these kind of tools with automation and things like that in order to make some of the repeats get louder and louder and louder, and then maybe shut them off or something like that. But if you don't do anything with them, they'll just go on forever and just continue to get louder and louder and louder. So you want to be a little bit careful with some of these controls, but that's what they're doing. You also have your factor, which I guess is another pretty important So we'll get into feedback. Feedback is how many repeats. Our crossfeed is going to be how loud the repeats are. And our factor is the timing of the repeats. So again, it's not always going to be called factor. Sometimes it'll be called beat or whatever. But in this case, we can choose independently from our left and our right. So this is a stereo delay. Right now, we have it as a mono delay because they're both doing the same thing. But if I were to make one a little bit different, say half, well, then it'll be you'll hear the repeat or the echo or whatever, the delay will happen at different times on the left and right speakers, and you'll get a stereo effect. So if I were to hit this button, you heard it kind of go middle, left, right, or middle, right, left, however it's set up. This one happened a little bit quicker than this one. And if we were to increase this feedback a little bit and do it again, you kind of hear it go back and forth from the left to the right a little bit, right? And so that's what this factor is. It just allows you to control the kind of the timing of the echo. And this only really matters if you have it synced. If you don't have it synced, if you have it on manual, this factor won't really matter because all it's doing is using math, figuring out how many milliseconds the delay time should be based on the tempo. And so as you can see, for a 3/4 delay at 90 beat per minute, it's a 375 millisecond delay, and that'll give you like a 3/4 note sort of feel, and that's what, and it has that kind of almost like a triplet sort of feel to it. Doop-a-doop. And if we put them both there, now it's in mono again because they're both doing the same thing. And you can make it longer, you can make it shorter, depending on what kind of vibe you're going for. And so that's all the factor is it's just kind of when it happens. And this might make a little bit more sense in context of the song, meaning you're probably not kind of really fully understanding what this is doing. But you can hear that the smaller these fractions are getting, the quicker the delay is happening, right? Or the repeat is happening. And then you can get so close that it almost becomes kind of a phase thing. We'll get over phase in a future video, but that's for another thing. So, and then a factor can also be thought of it is in like quarter note delay, eighth note delay, 16th note delay, etc., whole note delay. And that's just kind of how quickly the delay happens or what timing it happens. And that's usually done in milliseconds. If you have it manually done, it's always based on milliseconds. But these kind of give you a quick sort of math. The math is done under the hood, so to speak, and allows you to quickly get to some precise timing with these. So anyways, and then we have mix. Now, because we have this as an insert, the mix is very important. You don't want this to be at 100%, generally speaking, if you have it as an insert. But this mix is going to kind of control how the wet-dry kind of ratio. So if this mix is all the way off, essentially there's no delay happening at all. And then the more we turn this up, the more we're hearing the delay. If we go to 100%, I will hit this key and you won't hear the initial hit, you'll just hear the delay. So if I click, now you're not getting the initial hit, you're only hearing the delay. And so there's a little bit of a delay when I hit this key before you hear anything, because you're not hearing the initial hit, you're not hearing the dry signal, you're only hearing the delay. So if you're using this as an insert, generally speaking, you want to have, and this is to taste, like feel free to play around with it. You can have it at 100% if that's kind of the vibe you want to go for, if you want to hear just the delay. But if you want to hear the dry signal at all, you want to have this under 100%, and so you can mix this to taste. All right. And then we have our filter section. And this is essentially just a low and a high pass. And so we're cutting off all the frequencies below a number or all the frequencies above these numbers here. And so if you go back and watch the EQ video we did, this will make some more sense to you, but these are just pass filters, and this is going to just give you a little bit of a way to control the frequency of the repeat. And so if we play this here, it's going to sound a little thinner because we've sort of cut off some of the low frequency information and high frequency information from the piano, from the echoes. And so you hear that these echoes, I'll turn them up a little bit so you can kind of hear them, but you can hear that they're a little like, they feel a little bit like almost telephony here. A little thinner, right? And so you can play with this too. You can have, keep all the low information and just get rid of some of the high stuff. Or you can keep all the high stuff and get rid of some of the low stuff. And so you can have some fun with this. And this is just kind of a way to color the echoes, and just the echoes, not the dry signal. So we're still hearing the full dry signal here, but we're just filtering the echoes a little bit here. Which would be different than just putting an EQ on this as an insert. Now, if we were doing this as a send or an aux, which is way more common, then you can just use any old EQ and EQ this delay however you want it to be, and it will be fine. And we'll get into that here in a little bit. But that's what the filter is doing. It's just a high pass and a low pass, and it allows you to color the repeats, the echoes a little bit, and make them a little bit more colored, I guess, for lack of a better word, a little add interest or whatever. Diffusion and amount, this generally doesn't tend to matter too much, but this is just a little bit extra control over how quickly they go away or don't go away. I don't actually tend to play with these very much generally speaking. They don't tend to affect the sound all that much from what I can tell, but maybe I'm missing something. So for those of you who like to just play with everything, go ahead, play with it and see what the difference is between having them on or off. But I think it's just a little bit extra control over how the repeats kind of dissipate towards the end. At least that's my guess. I don't actually know for sure. Like I said, I don't tend to play with this too much because I haven't really found it to affect the sound too much when I play with this, but go ahead and play with it yourself, and maybe you can figure it out. So anyways, those are some of the basic options that exist on this delay, and you can use this in all sorts of different ways to create interest to your tracks, whether it's vocals, piano, whatever. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a bus, but I'm going to use this as I'm going to use it as an aux. So we're going to put our delay down here. We'll label this delay. Now, with a bus, generally speaking, you're going to be outputting. You're going to use the output here and send it to this delay bus. But since I'm going to be using this as an aux track instead, I'm going to use this send feature. And now I'm sending a copy of our signal down here. Now, whenever you have this as a aux track, you want this mix to be 100%. And now what's happening is that we are sending just as a refresher course here when it comes to signal flow. When you're using an aux track, it's essentially a copy. So we have our main track here, and then now we've turned this into a copy of the track. And then, so it's essentially our main track, copy of our track, and then we're going to be delaying the copy of our track. And then this is going to be serve as our dry track, and this is going to be our delay track. So this is 100% delay, and this is 100% dry, and we can play with the amount of delay that we're getting by using this send level here. And so if we were to bring back our piano roll view here, that's with our delay. Oh, no, I'm looking at the wrong thing here. So with our delay all the way up. But if we turn this down, they're getting a little quieter, right? And that's because we're sending less signal into that the copy of our delay. This is generally speaking how most delays and reverbs are set up as a send. And the reason for that is because you can send multiple tracks to this aux track now, and this can be the delay for several tracks, and it saves processing power. Back in the day, if you were like in an analog studio and everything was, done with that, this would save you if you only had one delay unit or two delay units in your entire studio because they were expensive hardware pieces. Well, this allows you now to send multiple tracks to that one delay unit, and so if you had only a few options, then that was how you would route things in order to free up space. So it's a little less important today because you can put a delay on every single track and you're never going to run out of those delays because there's an infinite amount of them. But this can save you on processing power, especially with higher end plugins that can take up a little bit more processing power. This will allow you to send multiple tracks to one instance of this delay, and then you don't have to set up 8 or 9 or 20 or 50 different instances of this delay for each individual track. You can just set up one and have multiple instruments go to it. And then if you want a different delay for another set of instruments, you can just set up a second delay or a third delay or whatever, but you don't have to have an individual delay for every single track. That being said, you can use it as an insert, obviously, and then you just want to make sure that you're paying attention to this mix so that you don't have it all the way at 100. If you have it as a send right now, like we have it set up, you do want this to be at 100% so that you're only getting the delay signal here on your aux track. Okay? Hopefully this is all making sense, and you can kind of see what's happening with the delay and how it works. It's just repeats and echoes, and you can control those repeats and echoes. Filter is just an EQ section, generally speaking, with pass filters or high pass and low pass. The mix is your wet to dry ratio, and factor is beats by milliseconds. Hopefully this is all making sense, but kind of, like I said, we're going quick through this. This is not super important that you memorize all of this. It's just, these are some of the basic components of an EQ, or a delay rather, and this will allow you to kind of control a little bit of how you want this stuff to go. And you can apply this to any sound source that you think would be cool, and you can give it different feels or different timings. A few common things that you'll kind of get with delays will be your standard delay, which is kind of what we're doing here, right? And that's just adding a little bit of life, a little bit of character, a little bit of movement to what's going on. But you can also, actually, you know what? So I don't have to keep going in between here. I'm just going to do a quick little piano part here. And let's do this without the delay on. So we're just going to mute the delay for now so that we're only hearing the dry signal. And we'll just come up with a piano part here that can be played. All right, so pretty simple kind of desus sort of thing. All right. And if you want more information on what desus and all that kind of stuff is, we have some theory videos out there, but this is essentially a D major chord when we're adding in a the second degree, which is this E. So a D major chord is a D F, a D F sharp A, and then we're adding in the E. Again, if you want to get more information on some of this theory stuff, you can. But this is essentially just a eighth note arpeggio with a D sus in there. All right, and we're just going to leave it pretty simple for now. I don't want to spend a lot of time on trying to figure out an entire arrangement or whatever, but just kind of give you some examples. So we have that going on, and then we can add some delay to it if we unmute our delay. And let's... And so you kind of hear what the delay is doing. Now, sometimes it'll be appropriate to have a delay, sometimes not. In this case, we probably don't want the delay quite that loud if we're going to be doing this. All right, and so all that's doing really is just adding a little bit of spice to our sound. So here's without the delay. And then with our delay. Just giving it a little bit of a wash. And again, sometimes like delays will work really well with your source material. Sometimes maybe not so much, depending on what you have going on or what you're setting it up for. This would be kind of like a sort of typical sort of thing. Now, because we have an eighth note arpeggio, that's getting pretty busy as far as what the delays are doing. And so maybe what we can do instead is simplify it a little bit. All right. So we'll just simplify that a little bit. I have like a little A minor-y thing going on there. And then we can sort of start to play with this a little bit more. All right. And so you can just, it's adding just a little bit of movement to what's already happening here, right? All right. So you're going to start to see kind of how this delay is happening. One other thing I guess we can talk about, because this is essentially it, is you can just use this delay to add repeats or echoes to parts. And there's a lot of different ways to do this. There's a lot of techniques you can use. And there's probably a billion different YouTube videos online that will show you all sorts of fun little techniques and gimmicks and things that you can do in order to use delay to add interest and create some kind of fun movement as your song is going, and how to use these echoes sort of to their fullest ability. Again, this video is not meant to be comprehensive. It's just kind of a way to show you that delays exist, a few basic components and controls to them. But one thing I do want to get into is something that's called a slap. Now, this is probably most common on vocals or guitar to a degree, but we're actually going to go to manual, and we're just... Oh, you can also have these linked or unlinked. So if we turn this link on, I can independently move one slider here, and it will not move the other. If I have link on, it's gonna, whatever I do to the left channel, it's also gonna do to the right channel. So that's another thing to maybe be aware of. So we have this linked, but actually I'm going to unlink it real quick. And a slap delay is just very, very short, usually between 30 and 100 milliseconds of delay. And I like to make it a little bit different between the left and the right channel. But it's essentially a very, very, very fast delay that happens. And you can, it almost gives the feeling that you're in a very small room, maybe. So it sounds less like a like an echo in this case, and more like there's just a sort of like almost like there's two pianos happening. So you can kind of hear how that affects the sound. And so if you go and use very, very short delay times, you almost don't even hear any delay happening. And so if we move this over a little bit and get this a little bit higher. But these very short times between, say, like 30-ish milliseconds, 100 milliseconds, roughly speaking, you can go a little higher, a little lower, whatever. But that's going to be considered like a slap delay or a slap echo or a slap. And that's based on old tape delay. If you listen to like old Elvis recordings and Beatle recordings, things like that, you'll hear this effect used quite a bit on their vocals. But it almost gives the sense that they're kind of like that there's two voices happening instead of one, or like that it's in a small room almost. And so that's a fun little trick that you can use to add some sort of flavor. But you can also, go higher as well. Like the idea behind delay is don't be afraid to play around with it and, see what happens when you... Right? And just kind of see what happens. So that's basically it for delays. You can use this on any kind of sound source, guitars, pianos, vocals, drums, and you can get some kind of interesting results. So like if we were to really quickly just do a very quick drum track here, and I'm going to make it super, super simple. We'll pick our kit here. Swedish drums. Sure, why not? And then we want to again, we're going to make super simple. I'm not going to try and do anything real crazy or interesting with these. This is just to give kind of an example of what you can do. And let's turn this piano off for now. Oh, that's why. I'm like, why is this so quiet? Because I copied the... All right. So if we were to now send this drum track to our delay, and let's reinitialize our delay so it's kind of more at a default sort of setting. here. Make sure our thing is 100. Okay, so this is basically just a default setting here. Right, and so it's almost giving you an entirely new drum groove. I'll mute it again so you can hear just what we're doing here without anything going on. Pretty simple, pretty standard, nothing crazy going on there. Then we add in this delay. And so it's just adding a little extra groove to your drum kit here. So that's another use for delay. And again, you can play with this kind of stuff if you want to give it a different sort of feel. You can do this. Yeah, so you can have some fun with it, right? You can have it so that if you break this out so that you just have your kick on a channel, your snare on a channel, your hi-hat on a channel, instead of all of them being on one channel, you can just apply this delay to a snare or just the hi-hat or just the kick or whatever you're feeling. So that there's an infinite amount of ways to use delay in order to add interest to your sound, and you can, play around with it. Don't be afraid to get creative. There's nothing wrong with, any of that. You can use this filter so that you're cutting off some of the high stuff, so it's more the kick that's being triggered with the repeats instead of like the snare and the hi-hat, and that can kind of give you some interesting results as well. It almost gives you kind of like kind of ghost note feels on the snare there. Or conversely, if you want to have it be more the snare and hi-hat getting echoed, you can sort of high pass the kick drum and get a little less of that going on. Oh, and one thing I just realized, this is synced to 120 BPM, not 90 BPM, which is what the drums are going at. And so even though this factor is at 1, it's actually giving us a different thing. So if we do a host, now we're at 90 BPM, and this is going to have an entirely different feel. Right, and it no longer has that kind of off-kilter thing. So I think this is, yeah, that 3/4 kind of beat. And so yeah, you can have some fun with this. Play around. You can use slaps. You can use whatever. Just real quick before we get out of here today, I do want to show you maybe just a couple other examples of some common delays that are out there that maybe you have seen or you might have access to. I just wanted to show you what stock plugins look like, but here's an H delay from Waves. This is a pretty popular delay you see pretty often. This is going to have your beat right here. So this would be your factor in this plugin. So you can choose between eighth note, quarter note, half note, bars, whatever, and then T would stand for triplet feel, and D would stand for dotted feel. And if you've watched some of my previous videos, again, you'd understand what some of this terminology means and how it applies. Ping pong would allow you to give a left-right feel, and then you can do a manual BPM host, which is 90, or millisecond, again, so you can dial in however you want to be doing it. You have a feedback, you have your dry wet, your output, and this is for cases where you have your feedback set. And in this case, feedback will not only make the delay longer, it will also make it louder. So you don't have that difference here between crossfeed and feedback. This is making it all in one. So feedback will make it longer and louder. And so if you have it going, getting louder, the repeats and echoes getting louder over time, you may want to use this output to turn down the how loud your echoes are getting, or you can turn it up or whatever. But this is just allowing you to have a little bit of control over the output of your repeats. You also have your filter section here, your low pass and your high pass, where you can link them so that when you do in theory, when you do one to one, you do it to the other. Oh, okay. So yeah, you can turn up the link and this will move them together. Analog, this is just different flavors of stuff. I don't know. You can play around with this. I'm sure that this really matters to some people, but I haven't really found that this adds too much to the overall effect of delay, but feel free to play with it. Maybe you'll have a preference yourself if you have this access to this plugin. And then the big real difference here is this depth. This is modulation, and then your rate. So this will actually allow you to modulate your delays and get some kind of funky results from that. So if we were to, let's just initialize full reset. There we go. Oh, another kind of fun thing here, this has a tap feature. So if you're not sure what tempo your song is, you can just kind of tap this and it will allow you to sort of set your delay time based on the how you tap this. And lo-fi just kind of makes things a little grimy. Adds maybe a little bit of distortion to it. But anyways, when it comes to this depth, so the rate is how fast you're modulating it, and we'll get more into this in the future too, but just briefly, the rate is how fast you're modulating it, and the depth is how much you're modulating it. So the more you want this effect to be heard, the more you turn up this depth. And so you can kind of get some fun effects with this modulation as well. And that's just affecting our repeats, not our initial sound. So and so if you want to add a little bit of wonkiness to your delays, you can use this modulation for some fun, cool effects. Again, ping pong will go left, right. We'll add the stereo effect. So anyways, that's an H delay. You can have a lot of fun with that one. I tend to use that delay a lot. It is pretty fun. And then I guess another one that we can look at is another like waves delay. And this is kind of like our stock thing. This has way more options than your typical sort of delay, but again, you can have some fun stuff. This will allow you to control how much your direct signal is, where it happens, things like that. Like this is giving you some fun stuff. You have your left, your right, your dry, You have your tempo, you can have your tap, you can choose manual, or auto, or whatever you want to do. You do have a modulation section here as well. So again, you have your rate and your depth. So you can have some fun with that. You have a little bit of options here on your filter types here. Instead of just a high pass and a low pass, this will actually allow you to choose whether you have a bell or a peak dip or whatever, shelving or passes. So this gives you more flexibility on your EQ section as well, and allows you to independently kind of mess with your left-right channels here. And you can even choose kind of how far left or right they are on the spectrum. And then you have your feedback section, which also allows you to have its own EQ section filter here if you wanted to use it. And then you can choose whether you want quarter, triplet, eighth, 16th note feels to here. Well, the grid here. And then, yeah, so you can just have some. So anyways, again, this plugin is just, again, allowing you to have some more options than even this one, and you can have some fun and play with it. But again, all delay is really, at the end of the day, just giving you some echoes, right? No. And so you do some fun automations with some of the stuff as well. Like this H delay would kind of do a similar thing if you play with this feedback and things like that. You want to be careful with it, though. Again, you can, especially with like feedback and things like that, because it will get louder and louder over time. So you just want to be aware that things can get kind of wonky. And again, delays will sometimes, oftentimes, especially with like your waves or whatever, some of these third-party things, will have lots of fun little presets that you can also look at to see, you know, what kind of So you can have fun with the presets and then, you know, use them as sort of a jumping off point to, you know, you can either keep the preset if you really like what it's doing, or you can tweak it to taste. But anyways, I hope this has all been helpful and that you understand delays a little bit better and how you can apply them to your own musical productions and have some fun with, you know, adding some of this spice of life, this flavor, this color to your tracks to give them some interest and just some colorization as far as a movement. And again, you can always do direct inserts on these tracks. There's nothing wrong with that necessarily. You just want to be a little careful when you are doing it, or not careful, but like you just want to make sure that you you understand what the difference is between an insert and a send and how it can affect the sound. So without delay. All right. And so, yeah, just adding a little bit of fun, a little bit of flavor, a little bit of spice to your tracks, some movement. And that is delay in a nutshell. Again, I highly encourage you to dig more into delay. There's a lot of great videos out there on YouTube on how to specifically use delay in certain ways in order to achieve certain effects. But hopefully this is giving you kind of just a general guide on how you can get started into the world of delay and some of the controls, some of the features, how it works, what it does. And you can start letting your imagination, some creativity happen on your own tracks, and kind of just play around and see what happens, because it's a fun little tool that can add a lot of variety and spice to your tracks. So anyways, I hope this has been helpful. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.